So we did win the die roll here. And let's see what we have. Alright, this is pretty good actually. Definitely going to keep. It's a turn 3 Thought Knot. Turn 4 Smasher. Or we could actually turn 3 the Smasher as well. Just because we have the Eldrazi Temple and the Mind Stone. So we'll see what we're up against. Bloodstained Mire. Sacred Foundry. Okay, so probably Burn, maybe? We'll see. Okay, Swiss Spear, yep. So this is a fine hand against Burn. We're pretty happy to be on the play. If we were on the draw, we'd be pretty sad. But that's the nature of the matchup. So the difference between Waste and Cavern of Souls in this matchup is there basically isn't one. Ghost Quarter, on the other hand, we can potentially use it as a timely way to blow up the Sacred Foundry. There are, of course, no basic planes in the deck, so we can think about trying to cut our opponent off white as a, later down the line. But for now, the plan is to just get these Eldrazi onto the battlefield before our life total shrinks too quickly. And Boros Charm. Okay, so that means probably no more creatures in our opponent's hand would be my guess, but we actually wouldn't mind an Eidolon at this point because we have 4 and 5 mana cost creatures in our hand. But I think we want to just go ahead and take a look at what our opponent's got. So I'm going to go for the Thought Knot. Take away one of those key burn spells, hopefully. And also, we can use Thought Knot to block, of course. So, actually a very good hand from our opponent. Pretty scary hand. A bunch of 3 damage burn spells. We're at 13. I'm going to take the Searing Blaze here because that's the card that if we block the Swiss Spear this turn, our opponent can Searing Blaze the Thought Knot pretty profitably. And I'm going to conceal the Ghost Quarter, so I'm going to play out this Cavern of Souls instead. And Relic, it's not really great in this matchup. Normally, just use it to cash it in, cycle through our deck a little bit. The Ballista, it can take out the Swiss Spear maybe in a turn or two, but that's not really our primary game plan. Chalice of the Void would be fantastic, of course. If we have a Chalice on 1 or 2, it means that a lot of our opponent's burn spells can't be cast, and that's normally good enough to win. Of course, didn't see Chalice this game. Now, Walking Ballista is very good at shooting down Grim Lavamancer. And the Lavamancer here is a real threat that we have to be worried about. So our opponent can fetch a Sacred Foundry. I'm just going to play out the Cavern of Souls again. And actually, there's no real downside to cracking the Relic here. What our opponent is trying to make sure, though, is that they have 2 cards in their graveyard for the Grim Lavamancer. We're likely going to want to ping it down with the Walking Ballista anyways this turn. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop the Relic. See what we can find. Alright, just another land. So our play is going to be to play Walking Ballista for 2 and to get rid of the Grim Lavamancer. The only other question becomes, do we also want to get in with this Thought Knot Seer? I think we do. I think we want to attack with a Thought Knot, and then the Ballista we can use as essentially a chump blocker for the Monastery Swiftspear on the next turn. And our opponent's very unlikely to make a block here. I expect this Thought Knot will just get through. We really do have to try to race our opponent, though, because the longer the game goes, the more likely it is that our opponent's going to have drawn enough lethal burn spells. Interestingly, though, our opponent's cracking this Arid Mesa. Maybe they're going for a Lightning Helix play on this Thought Knot, which I think we would be pretty happy about. If our opponent Lightning Helixes the Thought Knot, we're trading. Yes, our opponent does draw a card from the Thought Knot dying, so I don't know. It's pretty close, but it looks like our opponent is probably going to Lightning Helix end of turn. But now our opponent is not going to have any creatures on the board, so I think it's a win overall, this situation. So, yep, there's the Helix. And that's one burn spell that is not going at our face. Also, by concealing this Ghost Quarter, our opponent has actually been fetching out these basic mountains. So, normally the burn decks only play 2 to 3 basic mountains, so it could be that there are 0 basics left in our opponent's deck. Now, we're not obligated here to chump block with the Ballista anymore. The situation has changed a little bit. So, cards we know about, Skullcrack and Lava Spike. Those are the 2 cards that our opponent has. So, if we don't block, our opponent can Skullcrack us down to 9. And then we would take 2 from the Swiftspear. Yeah, I think it's the safer play to just block here. Pretty close spot, but if we don't block, we have to draw some more spells, and I don't think we want to use our turn just to pump Walking Ballista to make it so that the Ballista can actually kill the Swiftspear. So rather just preserve our life total. We know exactly what our opponent's is in our opponent's hand. They can only bring us down to 7 right now. Expedition map. Okay, so we're slowly getting to the point where Tron may be a real possibility. I think I'm going to go ahead and sack this Mind Stone, see what our card off of it is going to be, and then we can still have enough mana to play this Reality Smasher. Now, it may seem odd, but I actually think it's correct to just hold the Smasher back. Even though we've got a 5/5 and our opponent only has a 1/2, we're kind of playing for the late game at this point. And now, if our opponent didn't have any cards in hand, then we wouldn't be worried about the Swiftspear getting pumped up too much. But I would suspect that if we, say, attacked with the Smasher, our opponent wouldn't play the Skullcrack. Then they could Lava Spike us, Skullcrack us, and then all of a sudden the prowess on the Swiftspear can be pretty overwhelming. But interestingly, our opponent fetched out another basic mountain, so peculiar mana base here for the Boros burn deck. And there's a Karn Liberated. So we can use the Mind Stone once again to draw a card, see what we have on top of our deck, and then potentially just follow up with this Expedition map. Now, our opponent did draw a land, so the good news is that we're still only our opponent can still only bring us down to 7. We know that. So we're gonna have even more time. Seagate Wreckage, sure. I'm just gonna go ahead and play out the Ghost Quarter now. And essentially same plan as last turn. I'm going to pass the turn back here. Alright, our opponent's going for the upkeep fetch. Not sure I really understand that. We are only one land away from casting the Karn, though, so I'm not going to blow up the Ghost Quarter for that reason. Otherwise, I probably would. We can actually use the Karn to plus, and because our opponent's holding that Lava Spike, they won't be able to unload both burn spells here. So I really like our situation at this point. The Karn can take over the game while our life total it's high enough that our opponent's going to need multiple consecutive burn spells to win, and we also have plenty of draws before that sequence would happen. So the question is, what land do we get? We can try to go for Tron. We can try to break up our opponent's mana with another Ghost Quarter. I think I'm just going to go for Tron here. We may not get there this game, but certainly still in the realm of possibility. And there's another great draw, Chalice of the Void. So we can play the Chalice next turn. I think I'm still going to go for the Karn Liberated. And I'm definitely, I think it's correct to go upstairs. Not only does Karn get to a loyalty where it's almost impossible for our opponent to get off the board now, but we're also going to get one of those 2 key burn spells out of our opponent's hand. Our opponent cannot respond with a Lava Spike, so they have the option of which of the 2 burn spells to keep, and it doesn't really matter at this point. They could have already used the Lava Spike earlier. The reason why they were not is because in case we attack with the Swiss Spear, having the Lava Spike in hand is pretty beneficial. In case we attack with the Smasher, rather, then the Swiss Spear gets bigger. So it looks like the Skullcrack is what our opponent has gone ahead and exiled. And once more, just going to keep the Smasher back on defense. And once again, it looks like if our opponent's okay, I was about to say, if our opponent finds another basic mounted, there's something weird about this particular list, but there are 2 Sacred Foundries in it. And if our opponent just passes again, that's pretty strange, for sure. We have this Chalice, so we can, and now we have a second Chalice, wow. So, we can tick down the Karn and just get the Swift Spear off the battlefield. I like that. So we can start trying to close this game out. It's so long ago that we looked at our opponent's hand with Thought-Knot that I'm like, well, does our opponent really still have that Lava Spike? But we did see it. We did see a Lava Spike when we Thought-Knotted our opponent on turn 3. So this is essentially the lock. We can play Thought-Knot on both 1 and 2. And essentially all of the burn spells except for Riftbolt cost 1 and 2 mana. As well as the creatures. So you've got Eidolons, Grim Lavamancer, Swift Spear, and Goblin Guide. And they are all going to get basically bricked off. I don't think it's even possible for our opponent to win from this stage. So maybe our opponent will help us out. Yep, there's the concession. So, alright. We are going to be on the draw. for game 2. Hopefully it goes according to plan like that one did. We're going to board in our life gain, so the Basilisk Collar, and even the big mana creature in Wormcoil Engine will be coming in. Other cards that I like, Warping Whale. It can be used as like a counter spell, counter target sorcery spell that you have Lava Spike, you have Rift Bolt. It can also be used as removal, so if our opponent's tapped out, we can say, we know that the prowess on Swiftspear isn't going to be relevant. We can go ahead and exile a Monastery Swiftspear. Ratchet Bomb is also another reasonable option. It's pretty slow, though. Not sure about that one. So, Relic isn't great in the matchup. There's a lot of cards, though, that aren't great, to be honest. Endbringer, Ballista, lots of the big cards. Even All Is Dust is not really where you want to be. Dismember hurts our life total, so we don't want to be playing a removal spell that also deals us 4 damage. So definitely going to think about how to proceed here, because there's a lot of cards we don't want. Hangerback Walker is good. I think we're going to go for the Ratchet Bombs as well. Matter Shapers, Thought Knots, and Smashers, they stay in. Basically, it's kind of a choice between All Is Dust and Karn. Both are not ideal in the matchup because of how much they cost. I think on the draw, we'd rather have the All Is Dust because, hey, it's removal in case our opponent does somehow go wide versus us, but we don't really want to draw either of those cards. So I'm going to run this. So, alright. We do have Chalice. The Ballista and the Ratchet Bomb and the Endbringer, not really the cards we're looking for. We also are not really close to having Tron, and there's no Eldrazi Temple, so there's a few problems with the hand. I think it's a close one. Our opponent's on the mulligan, though. I'm going to keep on the back of this Chalice. Idea being, we can maybe play Chalice on one, shut off a lot of our opponent's cards, and then Ratchet Bomb can... Hopefully it's not too late for Ratchet Bomb to sweep away whatever creatures our opponent may have. So, alright. If our opponent's passing, that's a pretty good sign. Eldrazi Temple, also a good draw. So, if our opponent had something like a Goblin Guide or a Swiftspear, I mean, those cards do put a lot of pressure on. And our opponent's passing yet another time. So it's possible that our opponent has boarded in artifact removal for this Chalice of the Void. But at the same time, I think we want to go ahead and play Chalice. If our opponent has a removal spell for it, so be it. But we'd rather get this card onto the board. And expect an end of turn burn spell, if nothing else. Something like a Boros Charm or a Helix. But if our opponent isn't attacking us with creatures, it's a lot harder to find 20 points of burn, especially through a Chalice with no creatures. Although, if our opponent's passing the turn, that means they do have likely 4 spells in hand. So, unfortunately, this Basilisk Collar, we didn't have it earlier. Now we can't cast it because of the Chalice. It would be really nice to get Walking Ballista or Endbringer out and then attach Chalice, or attach Basilisk Collar to it. Unfortunately, as of right now, that's not an option. what we can do is keep this Ratchet Bomb on 1, just in case our opponent plays a haste creature. We can then blow up the Ratchet Bomb, although Chalice does brick off a lot of our opponent's haste creatures. But I'm still going to charge it up. End of turn here. Hopefully our opponent runs out of Boros Charms eventually. The Mind Stone is an interesting draw. I think we want to play it here, although it doesn't really accelerate our clock that much. If we play Walking Ballista, it could just get Searing Blaze, so we can play Endbringer next turn no matter what because of this Eldrazi Temple. So I'm still going to just play the Ballista for 2 and try to get something going as far as attackers. Now, if our opponent has a Searing Blaze, this is just going to be a great target for it. So Stomping Grounds signals that Destructive Revelry could be a card in our opponent's deck. We hadn't seen Stomping Grounds before, now all of a sudden our opponent has found it. We don't have the luxury of knowing what our opponent has. Don't think there's a need to charge the Ratchet Bomb further. I'm going to keep it at 1. Now we can off the Stomping Ground with the Ghost Quarter, but if our opponent has the Revelry, they would just respond by casting it most likely. So I'm not sure that's going to be that important. I'd rather just get this Endbringer onto the battlefield. Another card we do have to be a little bit worried about is Deflecting Palm, as well as Path to Exile. So although Path to Exile right now, it's bricked off by the Chalice, but sometimes the Boros player will board in those types of spells to interact with our creatures. And yeah, not feeling too great about this situation. Our opponent seems to have an unending supply of 2-mana burn spells. So I'm going to go ahead and get in. We can actually make it so that next turn we will have enough to win the game if our opponent doesn't have lethal in their hand. Which, kind of feeling at this point there's a decent chance that we're just dead, but gotta play to win. So I'm gonna put this hanger back into play. Of course, the Endbringer is gonna untap. We have 2 1-mana cards in our hand which we cannot cast, but the fact that our opponent didn't play a burn spell end of turn is fantastic news. Now we just have to be pretty worried about Deflecting Palm. That is the card that could kill us in this spot. I'm gonna go ahead, I think, and pop the Mind Stone. Let's see. So if we attack with just Walking Ballista and Hangerback Walker, we can pump Ballista up to 3 power. But it looks like our opponent's just gonna concede. So I guess that they don't have it. They don't have the Deflecting Palm in this spot. We were going to go for lethal. The question would basically be if we could afford to play around Deflecting Palm in this situation by potentially leaving back the Endbringer. But it looks like our opponent doesn't have anything either way. So that's going to do it